So right now, in Vail, Colorado, the local government has intentionally shut down the town's entire municipal transit grid.
Which is pretty wild to think about.
Right. And it's not because of a freak late spring blizzard or, a labor strike. It is literally so the bus drivers can have a designated appreciation lunch.
Yeah, an appreciation lunch right in the middle of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to understand why a local government would knowingly paralyze its own infrastructure like that, you have to look, 7,000 miles away to a diplomatic desk and basically trace a very specific line of dominoes.
You really do.
So welcome to today's deep dive. Today is Wednesday, May 20, 2026. And our mission for you today is to trace those falling dominoes. We are synthesizing a stack of regional logistics reports, legal memorandums, and national feeds to show you how massive, slow-moving geopolitical tectonic plates eventually crack the pavement in this single mountain valley.
It really forces you to rethink how insulated any local community actually is. I mean, we're looking at a highly specific snapshot in time here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, out the window in Vail today, the forecast shows a high of 54 degrees. But up on the pass, there are lingering snow showers and 21-mile-per-hour wind gusts.
Typical spring in the mountains.
Right. It is that chaotic, unpredictable shoulder season, which, honestly, serves as a rather perfect physical manifestation of the economic climate these communities are navigating right now.
That's a great point. So to make sense of the bus driver shutdown or, the housing fights we're going to examine later, we have to start at the top of the chain, the macro shockwaves.
The big stuff.
Right. According to the national feeds today, the Trump administration has officially notified Congress that hostilities with Iran have formally terminated.
Which is a massive development.
It is. And that notification isn't just a press release, right? It triggers a very specific legal mechanism.
Yeah, it satisfies the 60-day statutory mandate of the War Powers Resolution.
Right, from the 70s.
Exactly. To understand the gravity of that, we have to look at the mechanics of the resolution itself. Enacted back in the 1970s, it acts as a structural leash on the executive branch.
Right.
It demands that a president cannot commit armed forces to military action abroad for more than 60 days without explicit congressional authorization or a formal declaration of war.
So it's a hard stop.
Yes. So by officially notifying Congress of the termination today, the administration is pulling the emergency brake just before hitting that constitutional wall, effectively capping off a period that saw the near-total closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
Which, as we know, is the primary artery for global oil.
Precisely.
Now, looking at the diplomatic back channels in our sources, this termination didn't just happen in a vacuum. Tehran actually utilized Pakistani mediators to deliver a counteroffer for a 30-day armistice.
Right.
And the core condition of that armistice was the lifting of the United States naval blockades on Iranian ports.
Which is huge for the shipping lanes.
Yeah, so we have this military de-escalation, but I look at the timeline here and the economic trauma.
It's already been inflicted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The shipping lanes might be reopening today, but the disruption has already baked staggering costs into the global supply chain.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the energy markets absorbed a generational shock. Over the course of the hostilities, jet fuel prices essentially doubled.
Doubled?
Literally doubled. The Argus U.S. Jet Fuel Index, which is the benchmark the aviation industry uses to price its wholesale refined fuel, it spiked to over $4 a gallon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We haven't seen retail prices at that sustained altitude in a decade. When the raw material required to operate your business doubles in price within a single fiscal quarter, I mean, the corporate casualties are inevitable.
And we have a massive one on the board today.
We do.
Spirit Airlines has completely ceased all flight operations.
It's credible.
Yeah, the federal government flatly denied their request for a $500 million emergency bailout. And without that capital injection, the airline just collapsed.
Completely folded.
But let's dig into the mechanics of that failure for a second, because, other airlines are still flying.
Right.
My hypothesis is that this exposes the fatal flaw in the ultra-low-cost carrier model. Like, legacy carriers, your United or Delta, they can bury a fuel surcharge in premium seating, right?
Oh, definitely.
Or they hike baggage fees across a massive international network to absorb an $11 billion sector-wide fuel hit. But a budget airline's entire consumer base is completely price elastic.
That is exactly the structural vulnerability of the unbundled airline model.
Right.
A budget carrier strips out every conceivable amenity to offer a rock-bottom base fare. Their margin for error is literally measured in pennies per seat mile.
Pennies.
Yeah. So when your operational costs double overnight because of an international naval blockade, you can't simply pass a $100 fuel surcharge onto a consumer whose only reason for flying with you was a $39 ticket.
Right, they just won't fly.
Exactly. The value proposition evaporates instantly. They simply lacked the liquidity to hold their breath until the armistice stabilized the fuel index.
So let's bring this all the way back to the Eagle River Valley. When a national budget carrier ceases to exist, it alters the economic gravity of tourism-dependent regions.
Fundamentally.
Because a mountain resort is, at its core, an export economy. They export and experience skiing, hiking, mountain culture. But unlike manufacturing, they have to physically import the consumer to the product.
Right, you have to get them to the mountain.
And the Eagle County Regional Airport is the primary funnel for that importation. While the physical airport is financially secure, through state infrastructure grants, the evaporation of budget flight options acts as this massive invisible toll booth on the local economy.
The barrier to entry just fundamentally shifts. I mean, the luxury demographic, the ones who travel private or just absorb the legacy carrier price hikes, they will still arrive.
Sure.
But the regional drive market and the budget-conscious seasonal tourists, they are suddenly priced out of the airspace.
They're just gone.
Right. And if the cost of simply arriving in the valley doubles, you lose the volume. That volume dictates the survival of the mid-tier lodging, the local restaurant tax revenue, and the retail sector.
So everything is connected.
Exactly. The macro squeeze at the Strait of Hormuz directly starves the municipal tax base.
Which then cascades directly onto the shoulders of the local workforce. When inflation bites and the municipal tax base is threatened, retaining the people who actually keep the resort's gears turning becomes an existential crisis.
It really does.
Which brings us back to our opening scenario today, May 20th. Public Works and Transit Director Tom Casmel authorizing a total 2 to 3 hour suspension of all Vail Core transit and bus services for an appreciation lunch.
Right.
On the surface, crippling your own transit grid sounds like terrible management. But functionally, this is an incredibly aggressive labor retention strategy.
It is, because it reveals a profound vulnerability in the municipal framework. Replacing a driver with a commercial driver's license in a mountain town isn't just about, posting a job listing on a website.
No go.
It requires recruiting someone, competing with private logistics companies that pay premium wages, and then somehow ensuring that new hire can afford to live within a reasonable commuting distance of the bus depot.
Which is nearly impossible.
The cost of turnover in that specific role is astronomical. So mandating a town-wide shutdown to feed the drivers is a highly visible, highly disruptive signaling mechanism to the labor force that their specific leverage is understood and valued.
It forces the public, the tourists, and the local businesses to feel the immediate sting of their absence.
Exactly.
But, a free lunch doesn't pay the rent.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the other pillar of local infrastructure highlighted in today's memos, the educators.
Yes, a big development there.
The Eagle County School District and the Teachers Union have finalized a tentative contract agreement for the upcoming academic year.
And the core of that agreement is a guaranteed 2.5% cost of living salary adjustment across the board.
Right.
And the mechanism of how the district funded this is really crucial. For years, the state of Colorado utilized something called the budget stabilization factor.
Right, the BS factor.
Yeah. Essentially, due to complex constitutional limits on state revenue growth, the state legislature was legally withholding a percentage of required education funding to balance the state's books.
They were writing IOUs to the school districts.
That is exactly what they were doing. But the state has finally eliminated that stabilization factor, which immediately released a $1.6 million net gain in state funding back to the Eagle County District, even amid declining student enrollment.
Well, I need to push back heavily on the celebration of this 2.5% raise, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
We are looking at an environment where the median home price in this valley is severely detached from the median income. Like, a 2.5% bump on a teacher's base salary feels like tossing a bucket of water on a house fire.
It's a drop in the bucket.
Exactly. It doesn't bridge the gap to a down payment. It barely covers the localized inflation at the grocery store. Is the district just patting itself on the back for a statistical rounding error?
Honestly, your skepticism is entirely justified if we only look at the salary.
Right.
Because you're right, the 2.5% is mathematically insufficient to solve the cost of living equation. However, the district administration recognizes that the open real estate market is completely broken for their demographic.
Okay, so what are they doing?
The salary bump is merely the baseline contractual obligation. The actual survival mechanism is the district aggressively transitioning into a real estate developer.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The sources detail their expansion of an alternative housing program where they are constructing apartment units adjacent to the high school, specifically to rent to teachers at a fixed rate of 30% of their base salary.
So they are entirely bypassing the free market.
Complete.
The local government has realized they can no longer pay employees enough to compete with out-of-state money and second homeowners, so they have to municipalize the housing supply themselves just to keep the schools open.
They're decoupling their essential workforce from the speculative real estate market. It is really the only mathematical way forward.
Wow. But if the school district is forced to become a landlord, it exposes the ultimate intractable friction point in the Eagle Valley land use.
Oh, yeah.
You cannot print more dirt in a valley boxed in by topography and federal public lands. And the data we have is staggering. The 2025 Eagle County Regional Housing Needs Assessment officially categorizes the situation as a structural crisis.
The assessment projects a deficit of 6,375 housing units over the next 10 years just to maintain current economic functionality.
That is a massive number.
It is. Over 2,600 of those units are needed immediately just to clear the existing backlog of underhoused workers. We are talking about a massive volume of construction required in a geography that is already largely built out.
And that macro-level structural crisis sets the stage for a hyper-local legal war unfolding today in Edwards, which serves as the geographic and commercial center of the valley.
Right.
A Denver-based developer owns a half-acre parcel of land in the Edwards core. In response to his plans, the Eagle County Commissioners passed a unanimous resolution to utilize eminent domain to forcefully seize that parcel.
And the developer is actively fighting the condemnation in court.
Of course he is.
Eminent domain is perhaps the most aggressive tool in a municipal government's arsenal. It allows the government to seize private property for public use, provided they pay fair market value.
Which is always the sticking point.
Right. The legal battles usually hinge on what constitutes that fair market value versus the land's highest and best potential use. In a valley where a half acre of commercially viable dirt is incredibly scarce, the financial stakes of this condemnation are immense.
But I look at the stated purpose of this seizure, and the logic seems completely inverted.
How so?
If the county is operating under a structural crisis, demanding over 6,000 housing units, why are they deploying the nuclear option of eminent domain to seize a half acre for a public park?
It seems counterintuitive.
Condemning land to plant grass when your teachers and bus drivers are living in precarious housing situations seems like a fundamental misallocation of resources.
It sounds paradoxical until you examine the civic mechanisms of a rapidly urbanizing community.
Okay, unpack that.
Edwards is absorbing the bulk of the valley's growth right now. It is transitioning from a bedroom community into a dense civic hub. In fact, right next to this disputed half-acre, construction is well underway on the Eagle County Commons.
Right, that massive new building.
Yeah, a 28,000 square foot facility designed to centralize government and health services. When you mandate density to solve a housing crisis, you simultaneously introduce the risk of overdevelopment.
You risk paving over the very reason people want to live there in the first place.
Precisely. Urban planners refer to this as the vibrancy premium.
Vibrancy premium.
Okay. If you maximize every square foot for commercial and residential density without preserving open corridors, the psychological and economic value of the municipal core degrades. It becomes unlivable.
So they need the green space.
Exactly. The county commissioners aren't just fighting for a patch of grass. They are fighting to lock in the civic identity of Edwards before the concrete sets permanently.
Right.
They are wagering that the long-term value of community green space next to a massive new government building outweighs the short-term yield of whatever commercial project the developer intended.
It's an incredibly high-stakes balancing act. They are playing a localized game of resource allocation while navigating the fallout of global supply chains.
Absolutely.
And on top of the diplomatic crises, the transit shutdowns, and the legal land wars, this community is also actively managing a historic environmental threat.
Yeah, the environmental data from the sources confirms that 2026 is officially classified as the worst snowpack year in recorded history for the region.
Which is terrifying. A record-low snowpack translates directly into an off-the-charts wildfire risk as we move into the summer.
It does.
And the community response to this terrifying reality is fascinating. Tonight, May 20th, the town of Vail is hosting the second session of the Wildfire Evacuation Game Night, a program driven by overwhelming popular demand,
I love this.
turning catastrophic disaster preparation into a community board game night is a masterclass in psychological resilience.
It really relies on a very specific behavioral mechanism.
Oh,
Yeah. When a population faces a systemic existential threat like a catastrophic wildfire season, the natural human response is driven by the amygdala.
fight or flight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People either freeze in panic or they completely compartmentalize and deny the threat exists because it is just too overwhelming to process daily.
That makes sense.
So, by gamifying the evacuation protocols, the local fire and police departments bypass that fear response.
They replace the trauma with muscle memory.
Exactly the mechanism. You gather the community, you introduce a social, low-stakes environment, but you drill the crucial information.
Right.
Residents internalize the fire-free 5 defensible space rules, and they mentally rehearse packing their vehicles for a mandatory evacuation without the paralyzing adrenaline of an actual siren.
It builds dense social cohesion while executing vital emergency management training.
It's brilliant.
It's active preparedness masquerading as entertainment. And speaking of entertainment as a coping mechanism, our sources highlight another event today that serves a similar, albeit more passive, psychological function.
The Derby.
Yes. We have to note a historic sports victory breaking across the national feeds. Trainer Cherie DeVuck just made history at the 152nd Kentucky Derby, becoming the first female trainer to ever win the opening leg of the Triple Crown with her colt, Golden Tempo.
It is a phenomenal milestone in a deeply traditional sport. And observing the prominence of this story in the feeds alongside geopolitical tension and environmental anxiety illustrates the necessity of cultural pressure valves.
When the macro environment feels entirely out of your control, when fuel prices double because of blockade or the snowpack disappears, people actively seek out unifying, low-stakes victories.
Right.
Watching a historic barrier get broken on a racetrack provides a momentary, collective psychological relief from the heavy machinery of the daily news cycle.
If we synthesize this entire stack of sources from May 20, 2026, a very clear narrative emerges about the modern municipal condition.
Which is what?
That the global and the local are no longer operating on separate frequencies.
Not at all.
The diplomatic armistice with Iran and the resulting collapse of Spirit Airlines demonstrate how quickly geopolitical relief can leave permanent economic scarring on domestic industries.
And we saw exactly how that scarring manifests on Main Street. The pressure flows downhill.
Always does.
It forces local transit directors to shut down their own systems just to retain the drivers who survived the inflation spike. It forces local school districts to entirely abandon the free real estate market and build their own teacher housing just to keep classrooms staffed.
Yeah.
And it forces county commissioners to aggressively seize private land through eminent domain just to preserve a fraction of open space amid explosive necessary civic development.
It really leaves us with a provocative structural question for the listener to think about.
Let's hear it.
If an international conflict across the globe can ultimately dictate whether a local educator can afford a roof over their head, or whether a budget airline survives to bring tourists to the valley, are local municipal governments now being forced to act as mini nation-states?
Oh, wow.
Are local town councils having to build their own housing economies, secure their own supply chains, and forcefully seize their own land just to insulate their residents from the constant violent whiplash of the global system?
It fundamentally redefines the job description of a local mayor or a county commissioner. They aren't just filling potholes anymore. They are the last line of defense against global macroeconomic volatility.
It's a heavy burden.
When the federal safety nets or the free market fail, the local town hall has to invent a solution from scratch. And that is going to do it for today's deep dive.
It's a lot to process.
It is. Thank you for joining us as we trace the lines from the Strait of Hormuz down to a half-acre park in Edwards. If you found this synthesis valuable, please hit that like button, share this deep dive with a friend who appreciates connecting the dots, and ensure you follow the page so you never miss an insight.
Keep your eyes open.
And remember to check if your local bus driver has had lunch today. See you next time.